growing revolution in digital and social media, contemporary marketers and entrepreneurs need help. One form of help resides in the effective integration of analytics with strategic marketing thought. Hello everyone, I'm Gary Hunter. Promotion I have very late, and my rationale mostly for having promotion very late is that oftentimes when people think about marketing, they think about just promotion, right? So marketing is often sort of reduced down to just promotion, and if you think about it that way, why would that be problematic for a marketing strategy perspective? Yeah, you miss all the strategic part, right? Because the promotion a lot of times is the end game. And so as consumers, we see a lot of promotional activity, but that really is sort of like the end of all this strategic thought that we've sort of put into it. So if somebody's done a conjoint analysis, if someone's done some sort of perceptual mapping and thought about what type of positioning strategy they would like to accomplish, if they've done all this segmenting, targeting, positioning kind of stuff that's left of that, if they've done a market opportunity analysis, a lot of those things often sort of precede the promotional activity that we're watching, right? So the promotional activity that we see from a commercial or through an ad or through a social media mechanism, all of those things are sort of more in-game types of activities. And then there's often feedback that the marketers will sort of solicit from those promotional activities to try to figure out how do we adjust the strategies that we're implementing now. So how do we go back and change sort of our marketing mix? How do we change the target markets that we might want to go after? So if you took like the Tata Nano case, right, we go all the way back to that case, they sort of had a strategy, they did their market opportunity analysis, they had the one lot car, they launched the car, and what was some of the feedback they got from that activity? What happened after the launch? It cost too much. Okay, so it cost too much at some point because they ended up, what made it cost too much? Why did it end up costing more than the one lot?
Cost of the car.
Raw materials.
The raw materials, so they've got a lot of suppliers who are sort of feeding into it. So that sort of, maybe that drives the price of the product up. And if it costs too much, then how does that change your target market?
The segmenting that you might have done to appeal to the lower income group just doesn't hold true.
Okay, very good. So a lot of the assumptions you made about the target market, just made that hold true because it's sort of like, well, this is maybe a different target market. So we've got to go back and adjust something, right? We've either got to go back and try to figure out how do we get the cost down in some way, right? So that we can go back to that market, or we've got to figure out different markets at which that new or higher price point might be appealing, right? So where does this value proposition work? So that's kind of typical of the cyclical nature of the slide, right? So oftentimes you're sort of like implementing, it's very dynamic, you get to the right-hand side, you go back to the left-hand side, and it's much more kind of cyclical. So seeing that as a dynamic, revisiting, rethinking marketing strategy is kind of important. So promotion, even though I'm sort of saying it's the end game, I'm also saying that it's not really the end game, but it's just sort of a step that often results from a lot of planning, and then the results of that feed back into the whole, what do we do next, right? So as I'm kind of talking through a lot of this is sort of, in my mind, right? So if this is in your mind, it's much easier to follow the dialogue, right? But if you're sort of not thinking about the framework that I'm using from the class as I go through one of these dialogues of talking about, well, what is product, what is price, it becomes more difficult to sort of follow the conversation. So what I want you to do is sort of get a good feel for this framework, and then get a good feel for sort of like how do you add depth to it. So don't see sort of how it relates, the interdependency. That's more sort of what we were just going through, right? The nonlinear component, well, it's not really a linear left to right model, but to see those things and to see how those things then drive new customers, how a company sort of gets these new customers, how those things sort of drive how they retain existing customers, right? Then if you can see sort of how all that works, then that will help with sort of like what cumulative profitability and stock price. Right, so this is sort of like your measures in pharmacy. So see, you're sort of doing all of these things in the PharmaSim simulation to drive these metrics that are sort of the most important metrics, or the metrics that we're using to sort of measure how well you're doing as a brand manager. Okay, so so this is just essentially a blow-up of that. So, you know, if you've got if you sort of got that in your mind, you're sort of in pretty good shape with kind of moving into the class and going into PharmaSim itself. So as we look into promotion, promotion means many different things, right? So we often sort of take one of these components off of the slide, and if you're following the class, we'll go into more depth on that particular component, so that you don't think about it as narrowly as just promotion, or promotion is the ad, promotion is sort of all of these different things. So promotion, sometimes like Salesforce management would be considered a component of promotion. So that's a conventional view of the Salesforce, right? So in my own work, a lot of times I don't necessarily think of the Salesforce as just being kind of an element of the promotional mix, but as sort of part of the product, part of what can kind of create value for the organization, those sorts of things. So, so most of what I'm teaching is a conventional perspective on marketing, but what you should try to do is sort of master convention, but also see sort of what's unconventional thinking, or what's kind of new, or a nuance in the work that you do, so that you can kind of adapt and adjust your own sort of perspective or your own view on marketing strategy. So advertising is the second type of promotion. So advertising is the one that people think about. So if I was kind of using what's the narrowest way to think about marketing, a lot of times marketing is reduced to advertising, or reduced to promotion, and promotion to advertising, right? Because ads are sort of like what a lot of people think about when they think about marketing. The other major component is sales, right? So advertising and sales, some people will start the marketing class and say marketing is more than advertising and sales. Well, it is more than advertising and sales, but those two are a huge part of it, right? So instead of like teaching all the other parts, I want you to know all the other parts, but try to keep in mind these two are still kind of major forces in sort of the marketing budget. So budget items will often allocate a lot to advertising and Salesforce management. This will kind of vary depending on how markets are influenced, right? So sometimes markets are more influenced through the sales organization, sometimes they're more influenced through advertising, and so a company's budget is often kind of adjusted on the promotional mix based on how they can influence different target markets. The integrated marketing communications is basically just bringing all of these different things together, right? So when you're thinking about these different elements in the communication process, when I think promotions, a lot of times I back it out and think first about communications and what is communications, right? So have you guys ever played this game, Chinese Whispers, or telephone? You have. Okay, so how does that work? Patrick?
So you would give me a message privately, and then I would pass it on to the next person.
Correct, yeah.
Around the room, and then at the end you see what the end message is and how it compares to the original message.
Okay, and how are those going to compare?
Well, they're usually completely different.
Totally different, right? And people usually what?
Purposely screw up the message after.
Oh, okay, well that's, yeah. See,
I don't know, we did that at work orientation, where we had not even stepped into our new job for one day, so we had a really vested interest in getting the message correct.
Yeah.
As screwed up as it can be.
Yeah, so even if we try, could we actually do it? So do you think, Jeremy, if we actually tried, we could
Let's
actually
try.
do it? Yeah, we probably would, but it would take a while. I think I'm just going to go with speculation. Especially if we include everyone but Jeremy, it sounds like our chances would be better, right? So what happens a lot of times is there's basically some sender. If you think about sort of the message, how does the message sort of get distorted? And how does that sort of relate? So the sender is basically often encoding a message, right? And that message is through some media. There's some media, the Chinese Whispers of the media is basically the person themselves, right? And there's some decoding that's associated with the message itself. So it's encoded, it's decoded by the receiver. The receiver then sort of responds to that message. There's some feedback that's associated with that response back to the sender. But throughout the entire process is all this noise that sort of happens, right? So what we know from the communications process is that we can kind of encode and decode things in different ways, right? And sometimes our biases may affect that encoding and decoding. Right. So what's an example of some sort of a advertisement that you guys might recall, or a promotional campaign, or an idea that someone had that was sort of a big idea that sort of went out into the market and it was totally received the wrong way. Do you see that much or not?
Web TV.
Web TV. Okay. So what?
I think this was like back in the 90s. They were essentially trying to sort of surf the web TV.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the broadband or the people were ready for that at the time.
Okay. So what was it about the message that was encoded or decoded improperly?
I think it was supposed to be seen as being convenient, because I've actually used that before, and it was very complicated to navigate through.
Okay.
To look at the internet from, it's a great idea, like, oh, this is going to be convenient, but the whole trying to do it was more frustrating.
Okay, so I'll take that and move it into a space where maybe more of us have played with that space. Is a space called TiVo, right? So when TiVo came out, what was the challenge with TiVo? It's pretty close. It's sort of related, but what is TiVo?
You record live TV.
Yeah, you record live TV, right? So TiVo, T-I-V-O, was actually the brand name of the first kind of DVR. So they had pioneering advantages on the DVR market, right? Digital video recording market. So when it first came out, you could record live TV, right? So you could record live TV. So that's basically sort of like the message, right? Okay, so if I told you that TiVo sort of achieved an awareness of like 80% of the market was aware of it, but only 17 to 20% actually tried the product because they got that message. What was the product's problem?
So the decoding was a problem for the other 60%.
Okay, a big percentage was it a decoding problem or a message problem, right? So the message is, you can record live TV, which is sort of about the message they went out with.
If you're going to be watching live TV, why do you need to record it? I guess that's the decoding problem.
Okay, so that could be part of it. If you're watching live TV, why would you need to record it? What were the alternatives to TiVo or to DVRs? What was it? VCR, right? So VCRs were sort of out there, right? So what could you do with the VCR? You could record live TV. Okay, so you see what I'm getting at, right? So that was the message. It's kind of like that you can record live TV. We already have VCRs. Why would we buy a TiVo? Because we can record live TV already. So this is the value proposition. You can record live TV. So how do you change the value proposition of TiVo to get the trials higher than what it is? You have to differentiate it versus the VCR, right? So what is it how did they end up differentiating it? TiVo. I'm sorry? Okay. It's easier. What else? What is it more about ease, or what exactly is it that makes TiVo different from the VCR?
You can record multiple programs.
Could record, so you could do that on VCRs, right? Multiple programs. You can do different things. I'm sorry? You don't need the tape, so you have a digital recorder, so
You don't have to rewind the piece of VHS.
you don't have to rewind the VHS. Okay.
More storage space.
You get a lot more storage space.
Biggest thing was
You're working with the live TV thing.
you can pause.
What is it about the live TV?
Advertising.
You can fast forward through commercials, so you can do that on the VCR.
You can record a program while you're watching another one live.
You can record one program. Okay, so you can do different channels. You don't have to be home. So which one of these things are different versus the VCR? You can do all these things with VCRs, right? See the problem? See what we're getting into? This is why it's hard to get. This is where your value proposition is kind of difficult, right? What can you do with it?
You can schedule in advance.
Okay, Steve, work with that one. So you can pause live TV with it. So now we're talking about pausing live TV with it. Wow. So how is that different from a VCR?
VCR, afterwards, you can't continue to record and stop and pause it.
Okay, so when do we need to? Okay, so the pause becomes kind of important to the value proposition, right? So the pause needs to be in our message, right? Whatever message we're sending, it's about the pause. So what makes the value proposition resonate? How do you sort of find target markets where pausing live TV becomes important? Well, you've seen the commercials on DVRs and TiVos, right? Who becomes the target markets, and how do they sort of convey that value proposition? What's in the message of the pause? Sports programs, right? So you're watching the football game, right? There's a big score that's about to happen, right? The team's driving down the field, and then what happens?
The pizza comes.
The pizza man comes, right? The pizza man comes, so you got to pause live TV, right? Go to the door, answer the door, get the pizza, that kind of stuff, and then you play again, right? So this is kind of good. So this is your target market. What else happens?
Families have 5 shows that they want to record at the same time.
Okay,
That's
so
been a recent commercial.
okay, so yeah, so these get more advanced, right? So over time, your message can get more advanced because they've sort of got the idea that you can pause when the pizza guy comes. But maybe families want multiple things and stuff like that, so the message can get more complex as it sort of rolls out. So what other scenarios? What else do you use TiVo? I'm sorry. So I used to like watch action movies and stuff, right? I don't watch that many action movies and stuff now, but I used to watch quite a few action movies and stuff. So my son was really small, so he was, I'm watching an action movie, and maybe it's a war movie. I like war movies. Okay, I admit to that, right? The guys sort of coming off of, let's say it's Platoon or something like that. The Marines are sort of coming off of they're sort of coming onto the beach, and they're all getting sort of mowed down, and there's blood and guts everywhere and that kind of stuff. And my son wants to come into the room that I'm watching, right? I can pause, right? Switch back over to the Disney Channel. Watch that for a while. You got to be good at the pause and the switch. That's the real key. It's a two button tactic, right? So these are the sorts of things that you kind of have to, so you got to find different target audiences, and you basically got to refine your value proposition so that your message, when you encode that message, it's decoded in a way that the value that the target audience basically can kind of understand what the message is back. So then you get some feedback that's associated with that, and then you sort of refine your messages over time, right? Okay, so these are some really common message problems. So the first one is called selective attention, right? So selective attention is we only sort of pay attention to the things that we sort of want to, right? The rest of it we sort of block out and ignore. So we're sort of thinking about something else while, something else is going on. We only pay attention to this part or that part. Selective distortion is sort of like where we add something to or subtract something to a message, right? So if I went back to Jeremy's comment about what's different, right? You can record live TV. So as soon as he said that, a lot of people are sort of adding something to it because you know something about DVRs, right? Or you're subtracting something from that, right? So this is sort of the whole idea of how you can distort different messages. And so that's a pretty common sort of tactic, selective distortion. Then selective retention is essentially where we're exposed to so many different promotional events in a particular day. Like I think it's something like 1,600 within the first 5 or 6 hours we're awake, right? The average person in terms of promotional activity. So you don't pay attention to all 1,600 of those, right? So it becomes very difficult for marketers to sort of cut through the clutter because people are really good at sort of only paying attention to a certain number of messages. And then once you do pay attention to one of those messages, one of the complexities is, do you retain that message or not? So is it something that you're actually going to remember? So once you kind of noticed and thought about something, I knew that was a promotional activity, it caught my attention, and now I'm going to sort of forget it. So what marketers like to do a lot of times is they like to kind of get people into what's called self-rehearsal, right? So they try to get you into the role so you think about it and you sort of rehearse through being that person who's in the ad or being that person who's in the commercial, and that sort of helps them with long-term memory. And long-term memory then is sort of what's needed to kind of create these brand associations. So the brand I've used a lot has been Corona, right? So see how this is sort of, what is the self-rehearsal component of a Corona ad?
Look to the beach.
The beach. So we all go to the beach. Yeah. So we're all sort of on the beach. That's kind of a normal type of a thing, right? So we're sort of we fancy being there, right? As we get into this weather, the next couple of days, we'll probably think about the beach on occasion. So they're sort of, as they show this, they're trying to get you to kind of think about yourself being in the role of the person who's on the beach, and if you do that sort of over and over again, then it helps you to kind of retain this long-term memory. So when you're at the beach, you think about growing, right? So that's sort of the way self-rehearsal works. So there's another effect called the truth effect. So I like to talk some about the truth effect, because the truth effect occurs through a technique called brainwashing, right? So brainwashing is an old school approach that sort of has military roots. I was talking about platoons, so you guys can imagine that segue into brainwashing works pretty well, right? So how does brainwashing work?
Repeat something until people start believing it.
You just repeat something until people start believing it, right? So you repeat it over and over and over again. So the truth effect is basically, the idea behind the truth effect is that if you repeat something enough times, people will start believing it, whether it's true or not. Right? All the best with your efforts to master marketing and sales. I'm Gary Hunter, and I hope you have a great day.